Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are heading north. And I don't just mean a little bit north, I mean
Mm.
all the way up. We are going to the absolute top of the world.
To the ice sheet.
Exactly. We are talking about Greenland. But, not just the geography or the stunning landscapes you might see in a travel brochure.
No, we're going deeper than that.
We are talking about a specific moment in time, or rather, a specific secret that was literally buried under all that ice.
It's an incredible story.
Imagine this. It's 1959. You've got the height of the Cold War. The whole world is terrified of nuclear Armageddon.
Right, the tension is just palpable.
And the U.S. military decides to build a base inside the Greenland ice sheet.
Not on it, inside it.
Not on top of it, no. Inside it. It sounds like something out of science fiction, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Or a Bond villain's lair.
It really does. I mean, we're talking about a facility called Camp Century. And when I was looking through the source material, I honestly couldn't believe some of the details were real.
Yeah.
They had nuclear reactors, they had movie theaters.
Chapels, barbershops.
It's all of it, buried in these huge tunnels carved out of solid ice.
It was heavily publicized at the time, but not for what it really was. They called it the city under the ice.
The city under the ice.
And it was supposed to be this triumph of engineering, proof that humanity could conquer even the most hostile environments on Earth.
Right. And the official story, the one they told the public and, crucially, the Danish government,
Yes.
was that it was a scientific research station. They were just there to test construction techniques in the Arctic, which, to be fair, they did do that.
They did. You have to give them credit where it's due. Some of the first deep ice core drilling happened right there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it basically revolutionized climate science. They hit bedrock and pulled up these ice and soil samples that scientists are still studying today.
Wow. And there is always a but in these stories, isn't there?
Always.
That wasn't the only reason they were there. In fact, it wasn't even the main reason.
No, not at all. The science was the perfect cover. The real mission was something called Project Iceworm.
Project Iceworm. Even the name just sounds so ominous.
It was. The plan wasn't just to build the little research camp. The plan was to build a vast network of tunnels. We're talking thousands of kilometers of tunnels under the ice sheet.
Wait, how many?
The proposal was for 4,000 kilometers.
4,000 kilometers. That is roughly the distance from New York to Los Angeles.
Exactly.
They wanted to build a subway system for a continent made of ice.
That was the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And in those tunnels, they were going to shuttle around 600 nuclear missiles.
600 of them.
They even had a name for them, Iceman missiles. The whole point was to have them constantly moving on these hidden tracks so the Soviets could never target them.
A secure second strike capability.
The ultimate second strike capability. The logic was, if the Soviets launched a first strike and wiped out all the missile silos in the U.S., the Iceworm missiles would still be safe. Hidden under miles of Greenland ice. Invisible. Constantly on the move. Ready to launch.
But there's a twist.
Yeah.
And it's a twist that feels almost like, I don't know, poetic justice.
And nature pushes back.
It really does.
Yeah.
They built the camp, they installed the nuclear reactor, they started digging the tunnels, and then nature just intervened.
The ice moved.
The ice moved. It wasn't just a static block of ice like they thought.
No, it's what scientists call viscoelastic. It flows. It's a glacier. A very, very slow-moving river of ice.
And it just started crushing the tunnels.
It was compressing the trenches,
Yeah.
twisting the huge steel arches they'd built. They pretty quickly realized that maintaining a 4,000-kilometer precision railway system inside a moving glacier
Was probably impossible.
it was impossible. You just can't run a nuclear railway when the walls are closing in on you by several feet every single year.
So they abandoned it, the whole project.
Yep. By 1967, it was over. They packed up the nuclear reactor, but they left almost everything else behind.
Just left it in the ice.
They left all the waste, all the infrastructure, assuming the constant snowfall would just entomb it forever.
A phrase that never ages well.
Never. And that brings us to the broader theme of today's deep dive. We aren't just talking about a failed, sci-fi construction project. We're talking about the Cold War in the freezer.
Right.
We're looking at Greenland's massive strategic importance, the secret diplomatic dance between the U.S. and Denmark.
And the environmental time bomb that is literally ticking away up there right now as we speak.
Exactly.
And we have a whole stack of sources to unpack all this. We've got the original 1951 defense agreement,
Declassified documents about the H.C. Hansen letter.
which is a masterclass in diplomatic ghosting. We'll get to that.
Oh, it is.
We have reports on the catastrophic 1968 B-52 crash at Thule, and we have Modern climate studies looking at that waste from Camp Century.
It's a fascinating case study. You see this conflict between high-level abstract military
Oh,
strategy
yeah?
and the, on-the-ground reality. You see how the secrets of the past have this nasty habit of melting out into the open.
So let's start at the beginning, or at least the strategic beginning.
hmm
Why Greenland? Why was this giant island of ice so critical to the U.S. military?
Location, location, location. It's that simple. If you look at a globe, and I mean a physical globe, not one of those flat maps you see on a wall.
A Mercator projection, right?
Right, which totally distorts the poles. If you take a string and draw the shortest line from, say, Omaha to Moscow, it goes right over the North Pole.
The Great Circle Route?
That's the one. Greenland sits right on that path. It's basically the gatekeeper to North America from the north.
So in the early days of the Cold War, before ICBMs were really the main thing, the threat was bombers.
The threat was bombers. So if the Soviets were going to send long-range bombers to the U.S., they'd fly over Greenland. And if the U.S. was going to send bombers to the USSR, they'd do the same.
It's the ultimate refueling stop and listening post.
Precisely. It was a stepping stone during World War II for transatlantic flights. But as the Cold War heated up, U.S. strategy shifted from what they called a perimeter strategy.
Yeah. Meaning bases on the edge of the USSR, like in Turkey or Japan?
Exactly. They shifted to a polar strategy, a direct approach over the top of the world. And Greenland became the linchpin, the ultimate early warning outpost, and a forward base for the Strategic Air Command.
Okay, but Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, so the U.S. couldn't just, walk in and set up shop without permission.
Correct. And this relationship has a really interesting history. If you go back to 1941, during World War II, Denmark was occupied by Nazi Germany.
Right.
The Danish government in Copenhagen was essentially a hostage. But the Danish minister in Washington, a man named Henrik Kaufmann, he basically went rogue.
He went rogue. How?
He signed an agreement giving the United States almost unlimited rights to build bases in Greenland to keep the Nazis out. He did this totally against the orders of his own government, claiming that he represented the free Denmark.
That's an incredibly bold move.
It was. But after the war, Denmark wanted full control back.
And the U.S. wanted to stay.
Very much so. There was a lot of tension. In fact, the sources we have mention that in 1946, the U.S. actually offered to buy Greenland.
To buy the whole island, like the Louisiana Purchase or Alaska?
Yes. The offer was for $100 million in gold.
$100 million? Wow. We'll take the giant ice island, please.
Denmark politely but firmly said no. The U.S. even considered asking again in the 1950s, but the State Department warned that it would be seen as a deep insult to Denmark's sovereignty,
So if they couldn't buy it, they had to negotiate.
which led to the 1951 Defense of Greenland Agreement.
Okay, let's unpack this 1951 agreement because it seems like this is the legal bedrock for everything that happens later. What did it actually allow?
It replaced that old 1941 wartime agreement. It was more specific. It established defined defense areas, like Thule Air Base and Sonderstrom, rather than giving the U.S. unlimited access to the whole island.
Okay, so it puts some limits on them.
It did, and it gave the U.S. the right to store supplies and to fly over and land within those areas.
Store supplies. That sounds incredibly vague.
It was intentionally vague. That was the whole point.
So the million-dollar question, did it explicitly mention nuclear weapons?
It did not, and that is the crucial omission. Our sources reveal that the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission specifically advised the negotiators not to bring up the nuclear question.
Why not?
They knew it would be a deal breaker, or at least complicate things immensely. They preferred the ambiguity.
It's the old, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission strategy.
Or in this case, if you don't ask, you don't get a no.
Right. And Denmark was in a tough spot here, too.
Absolutely. They needed U.S. security guarantees. They were a founding member of NATO. And they used what some historians call the Greenland card.
A Greenland card.
They offer these concessions in Greenland to secure their position in the alliance and maybe to offset their relatively lower military spending in other areas. But they also had a very tricky domestic political reality to deal with.
Right. And this leads us perfectly into the next part of this deep dive, the double life.
Yeah.
Because publicly, Denmark had a very, very specific policy about nuclear weapons.
Yes. By 1957, the U.S. is pushing hard to nuclearize NATO's defenses across Europe.
Yeah.
They want to put nukes everywhere.
And in Denmark.
The coalition government at the time, made up of the Social Democrats and Social Liberals, had run on a very popular platform of no nuclear weapons on Danish soil.
No nuclear weapons on Danish soil. That seems pretty clear cut.
It does. They did add the little qualifier under the present circumstances, but the public message was clear. No nukes. And they were under immense pressure from the other side, too.
From the Soviets?
Oh, yeah. The Soviet premier, Bulganin, actually sent a threatening letter to the Danish prime minister. It warned that hosting foreign bases with these kinds of weapons could be suicide in a nuclear war.
Suicide. That is not subtle diplomacy.
Not at all.
So you have the Danish government telling its people no nukes, and you have the U.S. military saying, we absolutely need nukes in Greenland for our polar strategy. Something had to give.
And this is where we get to one of the most fascinating documents in this entire story. It's known as the H.C. Hansen document.
This feels like it's straight out of a spy novel. Set the scene for us.
Okay. It's November 1957. The U.S. ambassador to Denmark, a man named Val Petersen, approaches the Danish prime minister, H.C. Hansen.
Okay.
The U.S. wants to start storing what they discreetly called munitions of a special kind in Greenland.
Munitions of a special kind. Very subtle. Love that.
The American position was that the 1951 agreement already allowed it, but they wanted to, give the Danes a heads up. So Petersen asks Hansen a very carefully worded question.
What was the question?
He asks, does the Danish government want to be informed if the U.S. stores these munitions in Greenland?
Oh, that's a trap, isn't it?
It's a brilliant diplomatic trap.
Because if Hansen says, yes, inform me, then he's on the record. He has to either officially approve it or deny it.
Exactly. If he approves it, he's lying to his voters and breaking his government's platform. If he denies it, he angers his most important ally.
So what does he do?
Hansen knew he couldn't officially say yes. But he also knew he couldn't say no, because Denmark's entire defense rested on the U.S. So he wrote a handwritten note.
A handwritten note, not an official typed government decree.
No, very informal, personal. And the wording is a masterclass in ambiguity. He writes that the U.S. hadn't submitted a concrete plan, nor did they ask for direct permission. And then he delivers the killer line.
I have it right here in the source material. He wrote, I do not think that your remarks give rise to any comments from my side.
I do not think that your remarks give rise to any comments from my side.
That is the most passive-aggressive, high-stakes yes I have ever heard. It's like leaving a superpower on read.
It's a non-answer that functioned as a tacit acceptance. A wink and a nod. He didn't say yes, so he could always claim he never approved it.
Yeah.
But he didn't say no.
Which the U.S. interpreted as, go ahead, just don't talk about it.
Precisely. It gave him plausible deniability.
So the U.S. took this and ran with it.
They absolutely did. Nuclear deployments to Greenland began almost immediately.
What are we talking?
In 1958, 4 nuclear bombs were stored at Thule for about 8 months. Then, from 1959 to 1965, they stationed 48 nuclear warheads for the Nike Hercules anti-aircraft missiles there.
And, maybe most significantly, they started the Airborne Alert Program, B-52s, with nukes flying over Greenland every single day.
Constantly.
Which we will definitely get back to. But first, let's go back to Camp Century. Because while this whole diplomatic dance is happening...
The Army Corps of Engineers is digging into the ice.
Yes. 1959, 205 kilometers east of Thule Air Base, they start building the city under the ice.
The construction technique itself is just incredible. They didn't just dig holes like you would in dirt.
No, they use these massive Swiss snow milling machines, right?
Yeah, it's a cut and cover technique. These machines would just carve out these immense trenches like canyons in the snow. Then they'd cover the top of the trench with these huge corrugated steel arches.
And just bury it all again.
And blow snow back over the top. So from the surface, it just looked like a flat, white expanse of nothing, maybe a few exhaust pipes sticking out. But underneath,
you had this whole network of heated, lit tunnels.
and inside those tunnels, they placed all these prefabricated buildings. It had power, it had running water.
And it was all powered by the PM2A nuclear reactor.
The world's first mobile nuclear reactor. The idea was it was small enough to be flown in by cargo plane, assembled on site, and used to power these incredibly remote outposts.
Just remarkable. And let's reiterate the cover story versus the truth here. The public mission was science.
And they did do real science. As we said, they drilled that first deep ice core all the way to bedrock.
Which is still important today.
Hugely important. It gave us our first real look into past climates. It showed that Greenland was actually ice-free and forested about 400,000 years ago, which is, a huge piece of data for today's climate models.
But the secret mission, Project Iceworm, the sheer scale of it is what gets me. 4,000 kilometers of tunnels? It's not a research station, that's a subterranean country.
It was incredibly ambitious. The whole idea was survivability. In a nuclear war, fixed missile silos are the first targets. They're sitting ducks. But how could the Soviets possibly find and destroy hundreds of missiles that are constantly moving on trains, hidden under a mile of shifting ice in Greenland?
It would guarantee the U.S. could strike back no matter what.
That was the dream. But they made one catastrophic miscalculation.
They underestimated the ice.
They did. They treated the ice sheet like it was solid rock, like they were tunneling into a mountain. But ice flows. It deforms under its own weight.
The sources mention that within just 4 years, the walls of the trenches were closing in.
Yeah, they were having to constantly send crews in with giant snow trimmers just to shave the walls back to keep them from crushing the buildings inside.
What a nightmare maintenance job.
It was an impossible maintenance job. The reactor trenches were compressing, the floors of the buildings were heaving up. By 1964, they knew it wasn't sustainable. They had to remove the reactor.
And by 1967, the whole camp was abandoned.
They just walked away.
And when they left, they just left pretty much everything else.
They took the reactor core, but they left the support structures, the buildings, thousands of gallons of diesel fuel, all the sewage. Oh yeah, millions of liters of it. And they left low-level radioactive waste from the reactor's cooling system.
And then the assumption was?
The assumption was the ice would continue to accumulate year after year, and it would all be entombed forever, crushed and frozen and buried so deep it would never see the light of day again.
Entombed forever. There's that phrase again. It always comes back to haunt you.
Always.
But before we talk about that environmental hangover, we have to talk about the event that blew the lid off the entire nuclear secret in Greenland. The 1968 crash.
The broken arrow.
Right. So we mentioned the Airborne Alert Program. This was the strategy where B-52 bombers were in the air, 247 carrying nuclear weapons, ready to fly to Russia on a moment's notice.
The official code name was Chrome Dome. And a key part of that was something called the Thule Monitor mission.
The Thule Monitor.
B-52s would specifically circle Thule Air Base around the clock to guard the BMEWS radar installation there.
BMEWS. Can you break that down?
Yeah, it's the Ballistic Missile Early Warning System.
Yeah.
A series of absolutely massive radars that would be the first thing to spot Soviet ICBMs coming over the pole. It was the eyes of America's nuclear defense.
So the B-52s were flying overhead to make sure that if the very first act of a war was the Soviets taking out that radar, there was still an observer.
And a retaliatory force already in the air right there.
Okay, so January 21st, 1968, you have a B-52. It's carrying 4 hydrogen bombs, and it's circling Thule as part of this mission. What happens?
A fire starts. It starts in the navigator's compartment, apparently from some foam cushions stored near a heater vent. It spreads incredibly quickly.
A fire on a plane carrying 4 H-bombs.
It's the nightmare scenario. Yeah. The crew tries to put it out, but the smoke is too thick. They can't make it back to the runway. They have to eject.
All of them.
6 of the 7 crew members eject safely and survive. 1 was killed because he didn't have an ejection seat. The plane, now pilotless and on fire, banks and crashes onto the sea ice in North Star Bay, about 7 miles from the runway.
So when a plane carrying 4 hydrogen bombs crashes and explodes, that sounds like the end of the world. But it wasn't a nuclear explosion, right?
Correct. The safety mechanisms on the nuclear weapons worked as designed. There was no nuclear yield. They're designed to be incredibly stable. But the conventional high explosives inside the bombs, the chemical triggers that start the nuclear reaction, they did explode on impact.
And that shattered the bombs.
It shredded the aircraft and it pulverized the weapons. It scattered burning jet fuel, pieces of the plane, and, critically, vaporized plutonium all across the white sea ice.
So you have this massive radioactive fire burning on the ice in the middle of the pitch-black Arctic winter.
And you have a massive political crisis. Because suddenly, the big secret that H.C. Hansen had so carefully ignored 10 years earlier was now a burning radioactive wreck on the ice for the whole world to see.
The Danish prime minister at the time, Jens Otto Krag, must have been just panicking.
He was. His government's entire public platform was no nukes. He immediately issued a statement claiming there were no nuclear weapons in Greenland.
But there clearly were.
He tried to spin it, saying the plane must have been in distress and was seeking an emergency landing.
Which was a lie, or at least a complete misunderstanding of the routine nature of the flight.
It was pure damage control.
Yeah.
But it caused chaos. The U.S. State Department was completely confused. They're sitting there in Washington with the H.C. Hansen document in their files thinking, Wait a second, we thought we had an agreement. Why are you saying this?
The lie was colliding with the secret agreement, and in the middle of all this, they have to clean it up.
Which triggered Operation Crested Ice.
And the conditions must have been just unbelievable.
Imagine it. It's a polar night, so it's total darkness, 24 hours a day.
Mhm.
Temperatures are dropping to -40, -75 with wind chill.
Wow.
And you have to send hundreds of people out onto the sea ice, which is, not exactly stable, and find microscopic pieces of plutonium.
They called the contaminated snow the black crust.
Right. Yes. It was this mixture of frozen jet fuel, aircraft debris, and radioactive plutonium frozen into the snowpack. A U.S. Air Force general named Hunziker led the effort. They had U.S. and Danish scientists working side by side.
And this is where the Danish concern for the local Inuit population really becomes a major factor.
It does. The sources are clear that the Danes were very worried about the food chain.
Because the local hunters.
The Inuit population there relied on hunting seals and walrus in North Star Bay. If all that plutonium-laced ice melted in the spring and sank into the water, it could contaminate the seals and then poison the people.
So they came to what the sources call a gentleman's agreement.
Yeah, one of the Danish officials put it very bluntly to the Americans. He said, "Don't dump your garbage in someone else's doorway."
Fair enough.
So the U.S. agreed to do something extraordinary. They agreed to physically scrape up all the contaminated ice and ship it back to the United States.
They scraped up the ice from the bay.
They went out with heavy equipment and scraped about 2 inches of this black ice off the surface. They loaded it into these huge 25,000-gallon tanks.
And where did they take it?
They put the tanks on ships and sent all that contaminated snow and debris all the way to South Carolina to the Savannah River nuclear plant for disposal.
The logistics of that are just staggering. But they didn't find everything, did they? There's this incredible story about a missing spark plug.
This is one of the most intriguing and still unresolved parts of the story. While the recovery teams were accounting for all the weapon parts, they realized one specific component from one of the bombs was missing.
What was it?
It was a secondary stage, the fusion part of the weapon. Specifically, a cylinder of uranium, a fissile core, that was shaped something like a marshal's baton.
So a cylinder of highly enriched uranium?
Exactly, a key and highly classified component. And they couldn't find it anywhere on the ice. They concluded it must have melted through the ice on impact and sunk to the bottom of the bay.
So they just left it.
Oh no. They launched a secret search. In the summer of 1968, after the ice melted, they brought in a deep-sea submersible called the Star 3.
And what was the cover story for a submarine diving in the bay?
The official story was that they were just checking for residual radiation on the ocean floor. But the real mission was to find this classified weapon part before the Soviets could somehow get their hands on it.
Did they find it?
They did not. The search was incredibly difficult. The bottom of the bay was covered in soft silt. It is, by all accounts, likely still there, buried in the mud of North Star Bay today.
That is just incredible. So you have this frantic cleanup, you have the secret submarine search, and meanwhile, the diplomats are scrambling to fix this political mess.
Yes, which leads to the diplomatic aftermath. The crash basically made the old don't ask, don't tell policy impossible to maintain.
The cat was out of the bag.
It was radioactive and out of the bag. The Danish public and parliament were furious, and they were demanding absolute guarantees.
So they negotiated a new agreement, an exchange of notes in 1968.
They did. And in this new agreement, the U.S. formally agreed not to store nuclear weapons in Greenland or overfly it with nuclear-armed bombers in peacetime.
In peacetime. I feel like that's a pretty big loophole.
It's always where the devil is, in the details.
Yeah.
There was a secret understanding kept from the Danish public that allowed the U.S. to reintroduce them in circumstances of extreme emergency or in response to grave and sudden threats.
And they wouldn't need to have a long, drawn-out consultation to do it.
Exactly. So the Danish government could go to its people and say, look, problem solved. We have a guarantee, no more nukes.
While privately knowing the U.S. still had a key to the back door if war ever broke out.
It allowed them to publicly claim there was now harmony between their official policy and the reality on the ground. But it wasn't until the mid-90s that the full extent of the decades of deception really came out.
And that was the Thule scandal.
Yes. In 1995, a bunch of U.S. documents were declassified, which revealed the original H.C. Hansen document and the true scale of the daily nuclear overflights. It caused a massive political scandal in Denmark.
Because it proved the so-called nuclear-free policy had been a complete facade for years.
It really exposed that core tension. A small nation like Denmark trying to maintain its principles while living under the security umbrella of a superpower that ultimately calls the shots.
And Greenland was the price they paid for that security.
It was the currency they used.
Which brings us all the way to today, or at least to the very near future. Because while the nuclear bombers are gone, the city under the ice is still there.
Camp Century. And remember, they abandoned it in '67 thinking the snow and ice would bury it forever.
But the climate is changing.
It is. A major scientific study in 2016 by a team led by William Colgan looked at this exact problem. The Greenland ice sheet is melting much faster than anyone predicted back then.
So instead of snow building up and burying it deeper.
In that part of Greenland, the surface is now ablating. It's melting away each summer faster than it accumulates in the winter. The tomb is getting shallower.
What exactly is still left down there? What are we talking about?
It's a toxic cocktail. You have an estimated 200,000 liters of diesel fuel.
Wow.
You have PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, from building materials and transformers. They're highly toxic and persistent in the environment. And you have 24 million liters of untreated sewage.
24 million liters.
They basically just pumped it all into a huge unlined pit or sump they dug in the ice. It was already causing a terrible smell back in the 60s.
Yeah.
Now it's just a giant frozen lake of biological waste.
And on top of all that, there's radioactive waste.
Yes, low-level radioactive coolant water from the PM2A reactor.
And the concern is that as the ice melts, this so-called tomb is going to start to leak.
The climate models in that study suggest that meltwater could start to reach the buried waste and carry it out to the coast as early as 2090 or sometime in the next century.
And once it gets to the coast, it gets into the ocean.
It flows out to the coast, and it enters the marine ecosystem. It enters the food web. It threatens the exact same environment that the local population relies on.
And so who pays for the cleanup? This time before it happens.
And that is the billion-dollar question. It's a political football.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. built it, but they left it with Denmark's tacit permission.
Denmark allowed it, but Greenland is now largely self-governing.
Right. Who is responsible? The U.S. argues the camp was abandoned under the terms of the treaty. Denmark says the U.S. made the mess, and Greenland is looking at both of them and saying, you guys need to fix this before it poisons our coast.
It's a literal and diplomatic mess, frozen in time, and now it's thawing out.
It is. And it all connects back to that original hubris, the idea that we could conquer the ice, build a city inside it, hide missiles in it, and then just walk away and let the planet swallow the evidence.
But the planet is spitting it back out.
Exactly.
So when we pull back and look at the big picture here, what does this all mean?
Well, I think it illustrates two huge things. First, the incredible and enduring strategic importance of the Arctic. We often forget, looking at our standard maps, that the top of the world is where the superpowers meet. That was true in 1950, and it's becoming even more true today as the ice melts and new shipping lanes and resources open up.
And the second thing?
The persistence of the past. The Cold War isn't just something you read about in history books. It has a physical presence. It's radioactive debris buried in the mud of North Star Bay. It's a toxic waste dump hidden in the ice sheet. We are still living with the physical garbage of those decisions.
That's a powerful way to put it. The idea that H.C. Hansen's handwritten note in 1957 is, in a way, the reason there are PCBs threatening the Greenlandic coast in our near future.
Decisions have long tails. And in the unique environment of the Arctic, the cold preserves those consequences perfectly until it doesn't.
Before we wrap up, let's leave our listeners with one final thought. We so often think of the Cold War as being over. You know, the Berlin Wall fell, the Soviet Union collapsed, we all moved on.
But the physical reality of it hasn't moved on at all.
Exactly. The waste, the radioactive ice, the buried diesel, the secret treaties, it's literally surfacing right now because of a threat they never anticipated. The past isn't just haunting us, it is physically melting out of the ice to greet us.
It's a profound reminder that you can't just bury your problems, whether it's nuclear waste or diplomatic secrets. Eventually, the ice moves. Eventually, the truth comes out.
And for you listening, here is something to think about. Consider the invisible agreements and legacies that govern your own country's security. What deals have been made that you don't know about? What else is buried under the ice, just waiting for the climate to change enough to reveal it?
It's a chilling thought.
It is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the city under the ice.
It was a pleasure.
Stay curious, everyone. We'll see you next time.